One of my favorite authors in the history of the church is a man named St. Thomas Aquinas. He died about 1274, and he was only 45 years old. By the time he had died, he had written enough material to fill a small library. Sources say that occasionally he would dictate to up to 10 different scribes at a time, giving them ideas, moving from one to the next, always completing the next idea for the next scribe, all at the same time. In his greatest work, called the Summa Theologica, he writes about the existence of God. And surprising to most of us, I think, would be the fact that he writes that there are really only two objections that exist for why people deny God's existence. The first one, he says, is because people believe that God is not necessary to explain the world. This would fall in the camp of a lot of scientists, I suppose. Richard Dawkins, God rest his soul, who died recently, would be one of those figures that believes that everything is contained in science that you need to know about the universe. But of course, that presumes that the universe is here rather than not here. But he says that is one objection. The other objection, he said, is the big one. And that is the problem of evil. The problem of suffering. Why do we have to suffer? To put it in a very simple formula, we say that God is all-knowing, and He is. We say that God is all-loving, and He is. We say that God is all-powerful, and He is. So if God is all of those things, first of all, He would know about evil, He would know about suffering. If He's all loving or all good, it means He would want to do something about it. And thirdly, if He was really all powerful, He could do something about it. And so the questions to the objection of God's existence risen from the fact of suffering in our life is a pretty good one. Why does God allow suffering if all of those things that we say are true about Him really are true? What's the answer? There really is none, except on the cross. He will go on to write, St. Thomas Aquinas, about how God can bring good out of even evil situations. But that still doesn't explain why evil exists in the first place. We say, of course, because Adam and Eve chose through their own free will to run from God, to not trust in Him, not trust in His love, and choose for themselves what's good and evil, and eventually get the whole world into a mess. But if you're going through suffering now, or you have in your life, it's not much benefit for someone to tell you that, don't worry, good will come out of this. Friends, what the cross means is that God's answer to the problem of evil and suffering is not a quick fix. It's the fact that He wants us to know that He's with us in all of it. If you follow closely the Passion narratives, and you see Jesus on display going from Pontius Pilate to the high priest, to the Jewish Sanhedrin, to the temple guards, you begin to suspect that Jesus is a man who's having a very bad day and is out of control. Things maybe got out of hand for him. But if you follow closely the narrative of the gospel that we just read, you have to realize that He is God. And ironically, unexpectedly, you have to know that He is in control, in charge of all of it. You would have no power over me had it not been given to you from heaven, Pilate. God gave you your power. You choose to do what you want with it. But know that you were given that power to choose what is good and not what is evil. After Jesus died and was buried, he was died in a new tomb. And oftentimes we can think, well, he was in a new tomb. That means they had a special place prepared for him. The reason why he was buried in a new tomb, you know why? Because he died a violent death. He would have been a disgrace even to his family. And in those days, you bury your loved ones in your family tomb. You share it with many different other family members. And he was not allowed to do that because of the death he died, as a criminal and a violent death. And so the tomb even he was buried in was not his own. Friends, very oftentimes we can get the sense at times in suffering of our life that God is not present. But that's precisely the opposite of what he wanted to teach us on the cross. That no matter what happens in this life, past, present, or future, today is called Good Friday because God brought the greatest good and the worst, what our human eyes perceive as the worst disaster, the day when evil men put goodness himself to death. Wait till you see what happens on Easter Sunday. But the Good Friday is good because no matter what you suffer in your life, the fact is that God has suffered with you. And God suffers for you. And he wants you to continue to enter into that suffering and give it to him. So friends, as we come forward to venerate the cross today, know what the cross costs. If you want to go home and read see the Passion of the Christ, that movie did not overdo it. From all of the historical realities of what the cross meant for the Romans, that movie was not overdone. He suffered that for you, so you in your life would never have to suffer alone. I want you to just do a homework assignment for me. You didn't think you were going to get homework tonight, did you? I want you to consider going home and reading our first reading again. It's from Isaiah 53. Isaiah is a prophet in the Old Testament, 700 years before Christ. In Jewish theology, if you were healthy, wealthy, and you had children, you were blessed by God. If you didn't have those things, you were not blessed by God. You were cursed by God. In the middle of the Old Testament, in the 53rd book of Isaiah, 53rd chapter, he speaks about a suffering servant who will take the sins of the world upon himself. That's a total outlier of Jewish theology. Why is it in that book? Well, friends, as Christians, we know that that prophecy was fulfilled on the cross. So your homework assignment tonight is just go home and read chapter 53 of Isaiah. But I want you to look at a cross while you're reading it. See the fulfillment of that promise 700 years ago come to life in your heart at that moment. Okay, can everybody remember that, Isaiah 53? Yes, mostly? Okay. Is there any football numbers that are 53 that you could correlate with that? I don't know.